Hi everybody, Andrew Cuneo here. Today I'm going to be trying another Alchemy deck. I've been playing a fair amount of Alchemy recently, trying to find something that I liked and that could be competitive, and I've come across this deck. Alchemy is a very strange format in that you can do a bunch of really powerful things, so you really don't run out of cards. So it's much more about just being able to like play to the board as much each turn as possible. One of the reasons that happens is that the One Ring is legal. Even the nerfed version of the One Ring is still just like an incredible card advantage engine. There's also just a lot of the Alchemy only cards like Rusko and the Jewel Mine Overseer, I think, or Porcine Portent, I think is the name of the pig making card. But anyway, there's just a ton of value attached to a lot of the cards. So it kind of winds up being a format that plays pretty differently than most standards have, I would say, because you can't run out of ways to spend your mana. Like you die before you ever run out of stuff to do, or you win. So that led to me struggling a lot because I wanted to build like a Rusko control deck, but just the way I wanted to build the Rusko deck was not reasonable. Like you can't just put cards in your deck that all they really do is draw cards. Like I was trying to play with Saren's Ransom, and it's not competitive. Like the One Ring is the only thing that's close to card drawing that you can play with. Anyway, that's a long intro to how I stumbled upon this deck, which is an Overcooked deck, which this card is pretty strange. So baseline, what it does is players can't gain life and you get a food each turn, which that is not a good combination. But if you trigger Celebration, instead of getting a food, you get a Food Fight token, which Food Fight is an enchantment that, like, you can just put this in your deck as a spell. It's in Wilds of Eldraine. And I actually tried playing actual copies of Food Fight in my deck in addition to Overcooked, and I decided they just weren't good enough. Overcooked is really strong. It runs away with the game pretty easily. So it gives you copies of Food Fight as the game progresses. Like, it's pretty easy to get a Food Fight every turn or every other turn. You need to be a little bit careful about whether you actually want a Food Fight, or sometimes you want the food because you already have Food Fights and you want to be able to sack the food. So you need to pay attention to whether you're triggering Celebration. And then Food Fight, importantly, gives this ability to sack artifacts to deal 1 plus the number of permanents named Food Fight you control. So basically, once you have a Food Fight, you're getting shocks from all your artifacts, but you can scale that up to like dealing 5 or 6 over the course of a longer game. And importantly, it's not just the food tokens, it's any artifact. So you can throw the One Ring, you can throw the Irencrag, you can throw Urabrask's Forge, you can throw Mishra's Research Desk. So you can throw lots of things. So it's easy to get to a point where you can burn your opponent for 20, or you can kill their whole board. So that's the basis for this deck, and this card is really good, I would say. The way I've chosen to round things out is I have 4 copies of Urabrask's Forge. This is primarily because it's a good way to reliably trigger Celebration. And it's also in some ways a card that kind of plays similarly to Overcooked in that it's like a 1-card engine that if you can just control your opponent's board and let this one card, just incrementally do more and more each turn, you're progressing to victory. It's not a creature that's going to be attacking for 2 a turn, and you need to have some other creatures to support that. I mean, it does make a creature that attacks each turn, but it scales bigger and bigger, so it eventually will kill your opponent. Also, it's an artifact, so you can throw it to Food Fights if you need to. And importantly, my deck doesn't have any actual creatures in it, so there's no, like, you're sort of stranding all your opponent's removal. They can every once in a while, like, pick off a Phyrexian Horror with an instant, but it's not a very good use of a card for people usually, so it gives me like a kind of a creatureless way to win. I have 1 copy of the Mightstone and Weakstone just because it's a good artifact. Also, tapping it for mana gives you the ability to sack things to Food Fight because it costs 2 mana whenever you want to sack something. Also, you can sack tap things, so you can like tap the Mightstone and Weakstone and then sack it to food fight to deal however much damage that's going to do. The other thing I like about this card is it gives you an answer to Shieldred, which, you know, Shieldred is not a super popular card in Alchemy, but it is played, and it's pretty important to have answers to Shieldred if you're going to be playing with the One Ring. And out of red decks, there are answers, but you don't kind of get them for free like you would in a black deck. 3 copies of Koth. This is where my Overcooked deck differs from ones that I played against on the ladder. So I wanted to try being mono red just because I think Koth is actually a really powerful planeswalker in Alchemy. It's sort of this idea that you can't run out of stuff to do, so you really just want to have access to as much mana as possible as the game goes on. So just finding a land of return is actually fairly powerful. So, you know, you play this, you kill their best creature, hopefully it lives, and then you're just getting a land of return for the rest of the game. And the ultimate is also really threatening from Koth, and you get there pretty quick because of how fast the loyalty ticks up. So that led to me playing mono red. I've got 21 mountains in my deck, 4 demolition fields. I wanted to play a few colorless lands that did something for me. So your choices are kind of Demolition Field, Mishra's Foundry, Mirex. I'm sure there are other ones, but like those were the top 3 to me. I started with Mishra's Foundries, and I found that I wasn't really activating them to attack or block all that often. And even though you can animate Mishra's Foundry and sack it to food fight, I also wasn't doing that all that often because that's pretty expensive to do. But I was sometimes struggling against creature lands out of opposing decks, especially the 4 toughness ones, like the black-green one and the white-black one. So it's nice to have Demolition Field to answer that. Also, a lot of people are playing really greedy mana bases in Alchemy. So most people will have like at least 1 basic, but you can, if you draw 2 Demolition Fields, sometimes they're not gonna have a second land to search for. Or you can cut your opponent off of a color a lot of the times. So I find Demolition Field to be pretty strong. I haven't tried Mirex, but I think it's probably the worst of the 3 that I mentioned. Moving on. I have 3 copies of Brotherhood's End in my deck. The way most people have constructed their Alchemy decks, they don't have a ton of high toughness creatures, so this usually sweeps most of the creatures in play. And there's a lot of good 3/3s and 3/1s like Crucius, Rusco, the Jeweled Mine Overseer, which that's probably not really the name of the card, but it's the white-red 3/3, Jarsol. And then there's other things that are kind of just incidentally nice to pick up, like Juggernaut Peddler. That's probably not the name of it either. The thing that gives you a Juggernaut and exiles a card from your hand. So this is a really good sweeper. The Destroy All Artifacts part is really punishing against you, so you rarely choose that. Every once in a while I have chosen it, but for the most part you're dealing 3 to each creature and each planeswalker. It's very important to note that it does deal 3 to your Koth. So if you draw these 2 cards together, you might want to sequence it so you play the Brotherhood's End first, or at a minimum you need to be aware that you might kill your own Koth if you're not careful. I mean, sometimes you might kill your own Koth and you just can't help it, but that is an important thing to note. 1 copy of Spiteful Banditry. So this deals X damage to each creature, and then you get a treasure as long as 1 or more creature died, and you can only trigger it once a turn. So you would think, okay, I want artifacts to sack. This thing's going to kill creatures and make me treasures. This is going to be great. In reality, it's just kind of expensive. I started with more copies of this, and I'm down to just the 1. It is sometimes really nice, but I think Brotherhood's End is the better of the 2. I wanted to play a mix. This is going to look a little bit weird, having 3 copies of a legendary artifact that in theory wants you to flip it by playing legendary creatures. In reality, I just wanted the mana ramp. Flipping this thing, I put it in other decks that could flip it, and like you never want to flip it because you just want to have more mana in play in Alchemy, basically. So this thing, it allows you to ramp into turn 3 Koth, which is really powerful. It allows you to get your 1 ring on line like a turn sooner. Also, because this doesn't come into play tapped, it taps for a mana, so it effectively, it's -1 mana the turn you play it. So you can use it to trigger Celebration with Overcooked. Like if you have 4 lands in play, you play the Irencrag, tap the Irencrag, play Overcooked, and then you get a food fight right away. So that matters. And then remember, you can sack the Irencrags 2 food fights as the game goes on. So you might wind up with a second copy in your hand for a while that's not doing anything, but eventually you get a food fight and you can sack it for some damage and play the other copy. Also, 4 copies of Volcanic Spite. So I think this is a really strong 2-mana removal spell because, like I said, most of the creatures you care about killing are X3s in Alchemy. So this is going to be another thing we're going to be looting away extra copies of the Irencrag potentially. Then moving on to the 1-drops. I only have 1 copy of Candy Trail. I wanted another cheap artifact, and this is the second best one. We're going to get to the best one in a second. I just have 1 copy because it's like a 5th 1-mana artifact. Torch the Tower. Its bargain is really nice in this deck because it allows you to get rid of the One Ring if the One Ring is becoming too life intensive in terms of all the life you're losing. Also, you're making the Urabrask Forge tokens every turn, so it's pretty easy to bargain. And then finally, this has never come up for me, but it could in theory come up. Remember when you have Overcooked in play, players can't gain life, but it could potentially have made you a bunch of food. If for some reason you really needed to gain life, you could bargain away Overcooked to Torch the Tower, and then your food would turn back into regular food. I don't know, there's not really a good real-life analogy for that. Like, you can't unburn food once it gets overcooked by bargaining, but you can in Magic, evidently. And then, final card, Mishra's Research Desk. I found this to be really, really good in this deck because it's a 1-mana artifact, so it gives you a pretty easy way to trigger, like to control whether or not Celebration is going to be happening. Also, because it has Unearth, you can unearth it, and then once you have a food fight, you don't have to do the sack the Mishra's Research and exile the top cards. You can just turn it into, like, deal 2 or 3 damage, potentially, because if you've got a bunch of food fights, or more damage even. And also, it's just, it gives you some library selection, a little bit of card advantage. Obviously, it's a little bit awkward when you're playing with this high of a curve that you can wind up whiffing. But I think overall, it's just really, it's a really powerful card in this deck. Also, Hopeless Nightmare is a pretty popular card in Alchemy. And it's having something that even if you discard it, you can still get value later on is nice. Looking at the sideboard, a couple of big things that stand out in the sideboard. One is 4 copies of Squee. This is basically if you're playing a matchup where you decide you don't want to have sweepers in your deck, like Spiteful Banditry, Brotherhood's End, you can just board in 4 Squees. Like this deck has a lot of things that kill creatures, like small creatures. If you decide that it's not a matchup where that's what you want to focus on, you're going to be boarding in the Squees. Only 1 Lithomantic Barrage, which is a little bit weird because that is by far the best red sideboard card in Standard. But there aren't a lot of decks in Alchemy where you really want Lithomantic Barrage. Like, Raffine is not legal in Alchemy, nor is Adeline. And the deck already has a ton of 1-for-1 removal, so I just don't have many copies of that. I do have the 4th Torch the Tower in the sideboard, and then a Melt Through is just a 5th 1-mana removal spell. It's just fancy shock. 1 Cast into the Fire. This is in theory, so I can get a 1 ring off the board. In practice, I haven't really found that to be that necessary. The way a lot of people's decks work that are playing with the 1 ring, they're relying on gaining life. So if you have Overcooked in play, their 1 rings are pretty painful for them. 2 copies of the Stone Brain. This is honestly because I played an Overcooked Mirror at one point, and I was just like, this is awful. Like, once one person has Overcooked going, like, they're just going to win. Like, if you're a little bit ahead on mana and you have Overcooked, you win. So I was like, there's nothing I can do about that. And then I realized I could play the Stone Brain. And in theory, if you're on the play, you can play this on turn 2, and then Stone Brain their Overcooked on your 3rd turn, and that might be good. I haven't had it come up yet. This is not something that I really board in other matchups. Maybe you play against some sort of crazy deck and you'd want it, but I haven't experienced that yet. 2 Witchstalker Frenzies. These are additional Sheoldred answers. Also, some people do play like really low to the ground red haste decks, and I played this over Nahiri's Warcrafting because I think it is good to board in against people who are playing like a lot of hasty red 1, 2, and 3 drops because it's going to be way cheaper than 4 mana in that matchup. You know, you might play it for like 1 or 2 mana. Another Mightstone and Weakstone. This is another Shieldred answer. Also, it's just, you know, good card advantage because a lot of the black decks do have a lot of discard, so you want to have a lot of card drawing in your deck to combat that. And then a final Spiteful Banditry. I don't really have a specific matchup in mind with this card, but if you played against somebody who had a lot of low toughness creatures, it would obviously be good. In general, like the decks in Alchemy are far less defined than they are if you're playing a more popular format like Standard. So I just have a bunch of general answer kind of things in my sideboard, like Spiteful Banditry, because you could really get paired against almost anything. All right, let's play some games. Ooh, that's a good hand. I'm going to be able to trigger Celebration all that quickly. It's looking like. So I'll probably play the One Ring and just start charging it next turn. Yeah. I do have the option of Demolition Fielding the Cottage, but I think it's better to spend my mana to advance the board. If I had a second Demolition Field and I was going to be able to get them twice, it would be way more appealing, especially because they've already drawn a basic swamp. So I would guess they have not that many more basics left in their deck, although there's a basic forest, which that makes me feel like, honestly, like that might be their last basic, or maybe they've got one more. It is important to pay attention with this deck, because I'm playing best of 3, to like what happens when I demo field people. What basics do they have in their deck? So now it turns out they have 2 swamps and a forest. This person has a lot of basics. They must only be playing 3 colors. Sometimes people are just playing 4 or 5 colors, but not this person, it seems. So I have no way of getting Midnight Clock off the board in my main deck. I've just got to fight my way through it. Isn't as hard as you might think it would be.
The only path to victory is fighting side by side. Mirrodin, lend me your flame!
So now I've got 1 food fight in play, so all of my artifacts are 2 mana sack to deal 2 damage. Games like this is why I have so many copies of the Irencrag. It's just so powerful if you get it on turn 2. Especially against somebody who has a bunch of like tapped lands in their deck. They're leaving up Essence Scatter. Sorry to disappoint you, opponent, but I literally have nothing you can Essence Scatter. Volcanic Spite's also a nice combo with Koth, because these mountains are like pretty useless. Since I have Koth, so I'll be happy to bottom them. This is a lot of land. Ooh, a backup Koth. See if I can trick him into thinking the other pile's really juicy. It's another basic. I got him to take the other pile. Trick him succeeded. The only card out of all those cards that did anything, I would say, was the Shielded Edict. I suppose they could have needed the lands too. So this is a blue-black deck that's splashing green. Wait, they have Wrenn and Realmbreaker. They're not splashing green. This is just a blue-black-green deck. I hope they're out of basics. We've got 1 in the yard, 3 in play. We just have a lot of basics. Good to know, I suppose.
Itself.
They can keep recasting this every turn for all I care. Probably gonna wait till the end of their turn, use my 1 ring, and then just pitch it. May not even need any more cards to win, honestly. One card that they probably have in their sideboard is Tear Asunder, which is quite good against my deck. These are dealing like 3 damage a pop. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think I'm going to be limited by mana. Or so then. Other things.
Take this land from Phyrexia.
Now I can deal 5 damage per artifact I can sack. But I only have enough mana to sack 2 things. Also, next turn I can ultimate the Koth. So my opponent has a lot of bad things in store for them. So if they play the 1 ring and I ultimate the Koth, then I would have to deal 4 damage to myself or one of their creatures. It's a good thing to note. Really not liking their chances here.
It's all ashes and rust. The earth itself rejects you.
I think this is a matchup where I don't actually want the Brotherhood's ends. They probably just have Ruskos and the Dread Knights. I think I want this other Mightstone and Weakstone, and I think I want my Squeeze. It's not maybe not the best logic, but I tend to board out the one of Candy Trail a lot of the time if I don't think of something else I want to remove. It's possible I want more torches than Volcanic Spites because of the Dread Knight. I don't know. I kind of think I'm not too worried about the Dread Knights getting recurred. As we saw that game, I killed that Dread Knight with like 2 or 3 times, and it really didn't matter at all. That's kind of what I was talking about when I said that you just don't run out of stuff to do with your mana. Like, the value attached to that Dread Knight is so much lower than what you can get from other cards in this format. It's just not a big deal if they're casting it over and over. I did forget about the delayed half-lines, but luck is on my side. That is another big reason to be green. Maybe messed up boarding up all the Brotherhood's ends because they have that Planeswalker too. Although I bet that Planeswalker's really hard for their deck to cast. Is that a 1 ring? Yeah. Goodbye to the 1 ring. Not ideal. Do have the research desk, so I'm going to research desk at the end of their turn. Didn't attack with their land. They could maybe have boarded in negate. Let's find out. It's not negate, but it's something similar. I'm going to get 8, and next turn they're probably going to be able to hit me quite a bunch, but maybe not actually. I was just going to bring back the research desk to trigger celebration, but no need to because I have the power of the Irencrag on my side, doing all the ironing and cragging I need.
high ground.
Sadly, the One Ring does not protect planeswalkers, so that's what Koth was, a one-shot Koth. But I wanted to make my land drop. And I wanted to trigger Celebration. Okay. So I triggered Celebration. I'm going to have triple food fight going, meaning I can gun down this Restless Cottage if need be. And I have an Overcooked in play, which means that Shieldred, the one, like getting Shieldred the One Ring isn't going to do anything for them. There is a danger, though, that if they find another Terra Sunder, they're going to be able to get this Overcooked off the board. Close to being able to just kill them outright. I might have been able to... Yeah, I probably could have killed them if I had just ignored the Dread Knight. I think Squee kills them too, though. Oh, I can put this on the Squee? Decline. Actually, it deals more damage to leave it as a... mana source, because then I can throw 3 things to their face. Bang. This game's gonna be death by Irencrag. What a way to go out. Come on, the Irencrag off the top of my deck. The Irencrag is my top card. Then I can turn 2, play the Irencrag, then crack the research desk end of turn to find my 3rd land, and then play Koth. And then I'll be happy. Maybe that's not what's going to happen. So like I said when I was going over the cards in the deck, you need, these two cards are kind of a nombo together. Probably at this point in the game, I'm going to hope to cast Brotherhood's End before I put the Koth in play. But we'll see what my opponent does. I hope they don't block this turn. I hope I just deal a point of damage for no reason at all. Come on, don't block. Don't risk your Delighted Halfling. There's safety in not blocking. You know. They saw the line. So we have 3-color deck. So far, no basics. And the cards look pretty worn, which makes me think that they don't have many basics. If I want to keep the idea of the double Demolition Field play in the back of my mind, I want to play the Demolition Field this turn, because it means that if I draw the second one next turn, I can activate them both. Obviously that makes my Koth a little bit worse, but I don't think I'm going to need my Koth to deal 5 next turn. Would be better off not having played the Koth.
We have the high ground.
But I did get the double Demolition Field draw. Let's see how many basics you're playing with opponent. We do have a basic mountain. The basic plains. They have probably only one basic in their deck. I think they missed a land drop, so they aren't holding basic land in their hand. It's not that big of a deal that I got kind of a free stone rain on them at this point in the game, but still counts as something. They're the Jewel Mine Overseer. I think I actually got the name of that card right. That's insane. Never gotten the name of a card right before. This person knows the power of the research desk, though. I like that.
That's enough. Mirrodin is our land.
So sadly, I am knocking 3 loyalty off of my Koth here.
Get out of my way.
But it sucked up 3 damage. I've gotten 3 mountains out of it now, or is it only 2? And I've got a 4 loyalty planeswalker, so it's still doing quite a lot for me. Ooh, one of their 7 dwarves they added to the deck. Doesn't matter what I do. I think I'll just shoot this guy and keep the spite in my hand. Seems very unlikely to matter. He's taking quite a lot of damage this turn. Guess I'll pop the research desk. I should have done this before combat in case I found another forge. But I had enough mana to cast everything in my deck, including the One Ring, and use it. I also should have done it before I minus the Koth, because I could have hit just a bunch of removal spells. This doesn't seem like the start to a winning turn. Maybe. They're going off. They've got 2 7 dwarves in play.
We have the high ground.
This is a matchup where I definitely want Brotherhood's End. It's also a pretty good Lithomantic Barrage matchup, I think. They've got Pia Nalar and the Jewel Mine Overseer. I certainly want the Torch. I do sometimes trim forges against just straight ahead creature aggressive decks. Because I don't really need the forge to be winning. I can just kill everything they play and use the One Ring to eventually find Overcooked. Do I want Witchstalker Frenzy? Probably not. Do I want Melt Through? It's better against the Lighted Halfling, but it doesn't kill either of the white creatures, so I think not. This is not a great hand, but I think it's not so bad. I want them all again. Obviously, I'm really hoping to draw either Volcanic Spite or Brotherhood's End by turn 3. Probably looks like they're not doing anything, but they're going to play Questing Druid, whatever it's called. Oh no, they're going to play Virtuous Loyalty. Okay. This is always a big decision point, whether to play Overcooked or Urabrask's Forge first. I think I want the Overcooked in play first, because I think I'm not racing them. I think I'm just trying to control the board. This opponent is not at all afraid that I might play Brotherhood's End. Wanted to play the Koth that turn, so I could spend 4 mana. Next turn I'll be able to play Volcanic Spite plus either the Forge, or if I find something else to do with my mana, which hopefully I will. There's a danger that this thing gets out of hand.
Resolve never dies.
If I don't die this turn and the Questing Druid doesn't get huge, still have a shot. I didn't see that they had that land. That land... I don't think so. can gain life with the food. I think I'm just going to kill the One Ring this turn. If they have Reprieve, I'm going to die. This doesn't seem like the kind of deck that would have Reprieve in it, though. Okay, this is all manageable. Wait, they have this... They don't have black mana in their deck. At least they haven't seen it yet. It's kind of weird. I can't afford to activate this because I need to have mana to not die to a restless, whatever it's called, attacking me. Restless Bivouac. Gain life once. The demo field covers one of the bivouacs. That was probably greedy to actually even bother to play the mountain over the demolition field. Can I kill them if they don't block? I do. Because the Forge can deal 2 damage and the Desk can deal 2 damage. Oh, it's time to go down the candy trail. We want the Irencrag. Definitely don't want that. The research desk is probably fine, though. One of the things that people play in Alchemy is 3 Blind Mice plus the dedicated Dollmaker. If they play 3 Blind Mice here and then they have dedicated Dollmaker next turn, I probably can't win. That's a combo that, in order to be able to beat it, you need to be a little bit more set up. Like the only way you can beat that combo, which is it starts just producing 1/1s that grows. I think it's geometrically, and they start turning into 2/2s every turn. The only way to beat it is just erase it by dealing a bunch of damage with Overcooked. So here I'm gonna hold the desk because it would not be giving me celebration. Next turn, hopefully gonna just go Koth, get a land, play the desk, trigger celebration. Instead,
When this war
I
is
think I'm
over,
just
we
gonna
will
minus the
finally
Koth.
rest.
And then I drew the land.
Here comes
Obviously,
the
they
avalanche.
can kill the Koth with Imidane's Recruiter here. But I think I'm fine with that happening.
Another loss.
Just gonna burn the back half of the desk to get a second food fight this turn. Because I triggered celebration with the Irencrag and the research desk now. They've soul partitioned their own guy. Alright. So that's a legal play. Never seen someone get the third little pig. Do you think it was a misclick? Usually people get the first little pig and they take out my Overcooked. Which this opponent probably correctly could conclude was it was past the point of time where just having the first little pig was going to do anything. I'm not really sure what the third little pig is going to do. Do you think they don't remember that there's a one-ring trigger? I think they don't remember. This is just like a generally aggro deck. So I want this. I think I want Spiteful Banditry. It seems quite good against Imidane Recruiter. Do I want all my Torch the Towers? Maybe not even. Do I want the Lithomantic Barrage? They have to have Pia and Nalar if they're playing Rent's Resolve. Probably they have Jewel Mine Overseer as well. I think this is the same way I sideboarded against the previous deck, which I guess they're pretty similar decks. So this is a 4-color deck. Black is... Why did they do that right then? We may never know. Black is probably just for whatever the other half of Porcine Intent is called. It's a good card against me, in theory. I was planning on playing the Overcooked first, but I changed my mind because they played Takeshi's Welcome. I want to actually have some pressure to end the game. See if they're willing to risk the block. We're willing to block all along. I think one Forge is going to be enough. Forge is also one of those cards that kind of start... It takes a little bit of a ramp up, so playing it on turn 5 is not necessarily the best. So when you have two Overcooked, playing one permanent effectively gives you Celebration. Oh, I thought I... Oh, the Forge was why the first one didn't trigger. I was confused. Okay, that's fine. My opponent's Goose is still very much cooked. I don't even know if they have a Goose, but it's cooked. Oh, I was about to say that if they had Reprieve, it would do something. Does that card do anything? It's gonna flip, but who really cares? I can actually just use the Forge to stop it from flipping. Did they send everything at it? They did. Maybe I'm dead. Kill me next turn. 6. No, they're not even close. I'm just dead now. Death by Forge. Hooray! Well, I hope you enjoyed that. That was a bunch of matches where this deck was performing pretty well, which I do think this is actually a reasonably competitive deck. I put a fair amount of time into trying to tweak it. So there weren't any real like underperformers. I mean, maybe there's still a couple of loose sideboard cards that'd be easy to, you know, swap Melt Through or Cast into Fire or Spiteful Banditry. For something else, if you find something you think that the deck could really use in the sideboard. I think as we saw, playing with 4 Brotherhood's ends in your 75 is mandatory and is quite good against the Alchemy metagame. And outside of that, just kind of the core engine of the deck is reasonably powerful. We saw a bunch of games where Koth was pretty good. I didn't even get any of the turn 3 Koth games, which are where it really shines. If you go Irencrag into Koth, especially on the play, it's so hard for people to beat that because most people don't have cards that just kill planeswalkers in their deck, because the most popular anti-creature card is Porcine Portent. So there aren't like a lot of Sheoldred's Edicts being played, or I don't even know what other anti-planeswalker cards there would be. But there's not a lot of them, whatever they are. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.